The Heart of It.
Roy West kicking in towards the centre. Roy
A distinctly Tasmanian conversation.
I can feel what it will be like when Tassie plays his first game, and I just...
Lynch gathers, he's got loose men everywhere, but he decides to have a pump shot, and it's an absolute ripper! 200 goals for Peter Hudson. What a fantastic effort.
How did he do that? Bear kick finishes off in style.
Up towards half forward, Stewart flying over the top. Oh, pulled in a beautiful mark.
Well done from Scott. After all, he's got the first goal. Has it gone?
Nicholson has had the big ruck with it. Oh! Close.
Great to have your company on The Heart of It. Alistair Nicholson with you. My guest today has experienced the high of AFL Grand Final day and played a vital role in proceedings. At the age of 13, Glenorchy's Nick Foot decided to follow in the footsteps of his father Kevin and take up umpiring. Initially as a way of earning some pocket money and keeping fit when he wasn't playing himself. In just his second game, an under-11 match at Claremont, he was threatened by a junior coach and left the field at half-time in tears, vowing never to umpire again. That coach would ultimately be banned for life, while Foot overcame the traumatic incident and would return to umpiring 4 weeks later. There have been many other challenges along the way, but the reward of officiating in the 2024 Grand Final between Brisbane and Sydney made the sacrifices all worthwhile. In this episode, Nick Foot details his rise from junior football to the heights of the AFL, including the biggest howler he's ever made, run-ins with feisty former Clarence hardman Darren Winter, the pressure of umpiring in front of heaving MCG crowds, and the painful injury he carried during the 2024 AFL Final Series after a collision with the Bulldogs' Aaron Norton. This is Nick Foot's footy story. Great to have you on for a chat, mate. Thank you very much.
No, good to be here, Al, and chatting to a fellow great Taswegian. I'm not great, you are, but it's great to have a chat, mate, and I love what you're doing.
Likewise, mate, which is why I wanted to get you on for a chat, because I remember you as a young umpire in the TSL many years ago, looking a lot younger than we both are right now, mate. It's been quite the journey to your first AFL Grand Final last year. So how do you reflect on just broadly your umpiring career and the way it's progressed over the last few years?
Well, first of all, speak for yourself. I think I've aged terrifically.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Look, to be honest, I think the thing that gets me when I sit back and reflect on, starting out umpiring senior games at Huonville and the like is that it's just gone so incredibly quick. It's like I've blinked and, I'm 13, 14 years into an AFL career already. So, look, you get a little bit of time for reflection after certain milestones in this game, but it just moves so quick and there's just so much football being played. I mean, we've got opening round, the season's so incredibly long now, 25 home and away games basically for umpires. So it just continues to roll on, but I'm sure when it's all said and done, I'll be able to sit back and reflect greatly on it.
You started out as a footballer, didn't you? A junior footballer at Glenorchy in the North Hobart Footy Club. Can you tell us a bit about your passion for footy as a youngster?
Yeah, I've always just loved footy and been a footy head and breathed it. And yeah, I started like, I think most umpires, there's this probably assumption that umpires have never played the game, but I think we all have to some level. I played at Glenorchy Junior Footy Club. I started there in the under-8s and my father, Kevin, was actually the coach. He took me down to registration day and like all great junior clubs, they're looking for a coach when they're sort of signing up. And he ended up being my coach from under-8s through to under-13s. And I went to Newtown High School and that was sort of the under-13s, under-14s year. And all my friends played for the North Hobart Junior Footy Club. And I said to Dad, I want to go and play footy with my mates. And he said, no dramas at all. So I crossed to the rivals North Hobart and my dad continued to coach Glenorchy. So I actually played a game of junior footy against my dad coaching me. So I remember hopping in his ute and going to the game, and after they gave us a touch-up, I called Mum to come and pick me up.
I don't want to borrow this bloke anymore.
No, the family rivalry was true.
So what was your upbringing like, Nick? Where did you grow up and how would you characterise your upbringing?
Yeah, I'm a Glenorchy boy. So I grew up in the northern suburbs of Hobart. My schooling, I went to Newtown High School. Mum and dad a tradie, painter, signwriter. Mum worked in a school office. Had such terrific support at home. My parents are separated, but I was fortunate enough to have a stepdad in my life who's like a second father. So I'm very lucky in that respect. And they were just incredibly supportive of whatever I wanted to do. And I think with football and umpiring in particular, like dad was just a huge influence on me. So dad was a TFL goal umpire as well. And that's sort of where the avenue and where I stepped into the football umpiring world when I was 13. I was still playing at the time. And dad was umpiring junior footy, goal umpiring a little bit as well. And I said, hey, I don't want to go and stock shelves at Woolies or Coles or whatever. I want to just come and earn cash running around and throwing the ball in on the boundary or field umpiring with dad, which I did in, the under 10s on Sundays. So very supportive upbringing from a sporting perspective and schooling. I wasn't the most fantastic student, but I did try relatively hard. So I've always had great support around me and feel very privileged to have had that.
What was the environment like when you were a young kid going into umpiring? Because I've seen occasionally, and I think it's getting a bit better with a few rules around it, but some of the parental behaviour around umpires and even junior footballers it's horrific at times.
Oh, it's a disgrace, and I'd like to think it has really improved. I know when I started umpiring, I actually was doing a junior football match. It was an under 11s game, and I was umpiring with my dad out at the Cadbury's ground. I think it was Cadbury's number 2 or something out there.
Claremont.
Yeah, out at Claremont, the home of footy. And I was actually threatened by the coach of a junior football club. And it was only my second game. I was wearing a fluorescent orange polo, which we had to wear to signify that we're first year umpires. And he actually sort of beelined me and was quite threatening. And I remember I was 13 years old at the time, and I walked off the ground at halftime in tears and said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And dad was fair enough, and he'd nearly bloody given this guy one as well. Obviously, if someone's going after your son like that. Fortunately, I was very well supported by the league. That guy was banned for life from being involved in footy. So it was a pretty serious offence. But for me, I reflect on that and think, what if I didn't give that a go again? So I didn't umpire for 4 weeks, and I remember going, nah, I'm done. And I joined up umpiring at the time with a group of really good mates who have gone on and been really successful in umpiring in Tasmania in their own right as well. And we all went to school together. We all umpired together. We breathed footy together. So if it wasn't for that group of friends, I don't think I would have ever gone back to footy. And I certainly wouldn't have been sitting here talking to you today. So I can't imagine the amount of other junior umpires that's happened to that has actually walked away from the game from something so significant like that happening.
Yeah, unbelievable when you think about it, to that moment where you almost gave it up to now last year umpiring AFL Grand Finals for the first time. The environment around umpiring for you is initially, I want to earn some pocket money on the side. When does it start to transition into something more meaningful where you actually see it as a pathway?
It's a great question. And I don't think, and I'd be happy to be corrected if I'm wrong here, but I don't think any umpire starts out umpiring with the dream to say, I'm going to umpire AFL footy, particularly as a young guy. They're starting out to earn a little bit of pocket money. They love the game. There's the fitness component to it. I feel like that's the great enabler, and that's what gets you through the door. But for me, I was sort of at the back of the pack when it came to sort of coming through the ranks, because the state league hadn't been brought in until 2009 again when I was umpiring. So the pathway to the AFL through Tasmania was via the VFL umpiring panel. So we obviously had the Tassie Devils in the VFL competition, and we only had 3 or maybe 4 field umpire spots available to umpire VFL, and they'd get flown to Melbourne or umpire the Devils home games each week. And I trialled for the VFL 3 times, and I couldn't get on. I wasn't fit enough. I was just running around, happy to do sort of SFL Premier League footy at the time down here. I was the size of a house. Fitness was never my one wood, that's for sure. And I'd never really saw it as a pathway or an opportunity. And then like all things, you need a little bit of luck to go your way. And I know in 2008, that was the last year of the Tassie Devils before they brought in the revamped State League in 2009. And within a pre-season, I'd gone from not even being on the VFL list, and you'd have to be in the top 2 or 3 on the VFL to get to the AFL, to all of a sudden being sort of in the front of that pack in 2009 in the Tassie umpires, and we had a direct pathway through the TSL to the AFL. So it was a bit of a cheat code. I skipped a couple of steps because I sort of got my act together in about 2009 through my former coach, Mike Brown, who gave me a pretty stern word. He sort of called an intervention, I think, with my dad. I remember I walked in and I was like, what's this? And it's like, well, we think you've got some ability, but you need to pull your finger out, get fit and utilize it, but it's up to you. So I was really thankful for them sort of giving me the kick up the arse that I needed at that time. And all the world's sort of aligned in terms of the state league, the pathway, with that, and coupled with a little bit of hard work and realisation on my behalf.
So you, first year in the TSL umpires, you umpired that grand final, didn't you, between Clarence and Glenorchy? It actually looked like it wasn't going to be much of a game, and then Glenorchy roared back to life. I think Jeremy Weberley kicked a 60-metre goal late in the game to win it for Clarence. So how old were you then, and sort of how on top of your umpiring did you feel at that stage? Could you see things opening up a bit for you?
Yeah, I would have been 2021 at that stage. And that year was the realisation, that first year of the State League, where I want to make a real go of it now. And I could see that there was a clear pathway directly from Tasmania to the AFL. Previously, the umpires that were sort of before me in Tasmania, I speak of guys like Scott Jeffrey, they had to relocate to Victoria. So there was no real role model per se to be that, you know, this is the route that you have to take to get there. So I sort of had to develop it myself in many respects. But I know with the introduction of the State League, the AFL umpiring coaches, we then got put on, you know, their radar, and they'd start keeping an eye on games. And once there was that little carrot there, that was sort of the encouragement that I needed. And 2009 was probably the biggest, I guess, transitional year for me.
Yeah, and when you're that young, and you're umpiring players who are much older than you, I suppose, in that state league, as much as it was a sort of a young person's league as well. Do you remember any interactions, any players in particular that you found difficult to deal with, or any moments in games that sort of spring to mind when you relive that experience in the TSL?
By the time I got to the TSL, I was so well versed in umpiring men. It was before that, I think, where it was the cutting of the teeth. So I was umpiring Premier League senior footy at 15 or 16. So that was the real challenge. I remember doing a reserves game at Kingston one day, and it was Kingston versus Clarence in the SFL Premier League. I would have been 16 at the time, and Darren Winter was the coach of the Clarence Footy Club, but he'd play reserves up until the third quarter, and then he'd go off at 3/4 time and he'd address the ones and he'd get them ready for their game. And he used to absolutely give it to me. And I remember I would have reported him 2 or 3 times for abusive language and all those sorts of things. And whilst I never condone that behaviour, I actually look back at those interactions, and I was exposed to that at such a young age that I had the option to either sink or swim with it, and I chose to swim. And I think that really actually excelled my development as an umpire, because I'd had these experiences as a youngster. Now, whilst I wouldn't encourage it, to any community levels whatsoever, it was something that I feel I was more prepared for. And when you're going up against guys and you're trialling for the AFL panel as an umpire against Victorian umpires that have been doing TAC Cup or Coates League or whatever it's called, we bring in very different football experiences. And I think that really helped me shape my umpiring from a management perspective and fast track that.
Yeah, Darren Winter was a scary individual, lovely bloke off the field, but serious white line fever on it in every respect. But he's a scary person on the field. And you talked about that incident when you were young at Claremont. Have there been any other examples where you sort of felt scared or unsafe or worried about what was going on the field?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think every umpire would have a lived experience in community footy of varying degrees where they question why they're doing this. I know in a senior game, after a game, a player spat in my face when I walked off the ground at the TCA ground one day. and it was dismissed at the tribunal because there was no evidence, which is just extraordinary. So that was sort of a moment in time when I was sort of 17, 18, thinking, why am I even bothering doing this if we're not getting the support required?
So how did you handle that moment when it happened?
I was in shock, to be honest. I didn't realise. I walked back into the old stands there at the TCA ground towards the city end. I walked in and sort of sat down, and I said to the two guys I was umpiring with, I said, I just got spat on in my face. The player walked past me and just looked me in the eye and spat on me. So there's times like that where you just scratch your head and you think, what is the point of doing this? And each time maybe I'm just wired differently or a sucker for punishment, but those moments when you don't walk away and you sit here now, you kind of look back and you sort of laugh at it and you're like, well, look, I'm living my dream now, and the fact that those things didn't turn me away, I think just that's a feather in umpires' caps that have the resilience to push through those types of moments. And that certainly wouldn't be an isolated one for community umpires all across Australia.
Yeah, that's dreadful. Let's hope that bloke didn't get another free kick for the rest of the season, Nick. Unfortunately, you didn't get backed up by
the integrity
league.
Strong in this one. We just see it contest by contest there. I don't know what you're inferring there, mate.
Absolutely nothing. I'm just thinking about what I would have done in those circumstances, not suggesting you would at all. So 2011, you umpire another grand final in the State League. So you do the first 3 State League grand finals of the new revamped competition, and then you become an AFL rookie umpire that year, 2011 as well, don't you? Which opens up some pre-season opportunities for you. Can you talk about your initial sort of foray into the AFL?
Yeah, so we used to have the process is very different now. There's actually a full-time sort of talent ID scout, if you like, in umpiring that will go and manage the next crop coming through. But basically, the way that we trialled when I was getting on was you had to umpire your State League Grand Final, and then that gave you eligibility to whether the AFL coaching staff wanted to invite you for a trial. And the trial consisted of coaching sessions online all through the pre-season, and then NAB Cup or pre-season cup games when there were 4 weeks of pre-season cup, and you might be lucky to get 2 or 3 games, or you might do 2 and they might put you on for a half in one or something like that. And basically you got this condensed period to do the best you could and prove that you had ability or to be able to be recognised or to be able to push onto the AFL list. So I trialled in 2010 into 2011, and there were only 2 spots up for grabs. There was 16 of us trialling, I think, and I got offered a supplementary contract, which is a rookie contract, which basically says, we're interested in you, but we want you to get in our AFL system for a year. And as part of that, you can go and sit benches. So when we were 3 umpire system, we actually had an emergency field umpire. So that emergency field umpire would go, like, I'd do all the games in Launceston, I'd do all the Hawthorn games, and then they'd occasionally fly me to Melbourne to perhaps umpire a VFL game, and then also sit a bench somewhere in Melbourne as well. So you're getting exposed to these sorts of experiences and a little bit more of AFL coaching. So that was a good, I guess, that was a significant part of my development, to get a look at what the AFL was, because it was a pretty big jump from TSL to AFL. Like, I think VFL was a pretty nice conduit, but it felt like a pretty big stepping stone to go from the TSL, which was in its infancy, in fairness, and probably respectfully, it was probably at its heights as well in how the TSL unfolded in the end, those early stages. But I thought that was a really important step to have that rookie list before I went on to the senior panel.
So when you go from sort of umpiring Premier League, Southern Football League to TSL, and you're running around with, local footballers, to then being out, I remember the first games I did at the MCG broadcasting, I'd look across the boxes and see, giants of sports broadcasting, Bruce McAvaney and Dennis Cometti were next door. And then you're running around with AFL footballers out on the ground and telling them what to do. What's that moment like? I know you stay present as much as possible, but does your mind think to itself, gosh, like, look at this, look where I am?
Oh, big time. I think my debut game was the biggest eye-opening moment for me. It was the biggest nothing game, really, because it was the Gold Coast Suns versus St Kilda. It was round 2 of 2012. But I remember doing the coin toss, and Gary Ablett's the captain of the Suns, Nick Rewalt's the captain of the Saints, and I'm just thinking, what's going on here? Gary Ablett had 40 and kicked 2. Rewalt's kicked 4 or 5, but the Saints won by close to 100 points. It was one of those classic Sunday 440 type games at Marvel. But I'll never forget that game. It was just like, wow, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be.
And players talk about the intensity of going from a lower level, say VFL up to AFL for the first time. Is that similar in umpiring, going from one level to another, just in terms of the intensity, the speed of the game, and how quick you need to be to react and the level of fitness required?
Yeah, the physical component was enormous, stepping to AFL, where just the way they could zing it round, the fact that we're 3 umpires at the time, you're doing 15, 16 Ks a game, and a lot of that's at high speed. So thankfully, and my body's thanking it as well now at 37, that we've just tapered that back a little bit, the physical output with the 4. But that was incredibly quick. I found probably the biggest adjustment, though, was things just happened faster. So their decision-making was quicker. The skills were better, and if you were slightly out of position or you weren't proactive to getting to a spot, you'd just toast yourself, and you weren't getting to the best spots, and you weren't being able to make the right call. Where if you were doing that in local level or state league, you'd have time to be reactive and readjust. You just didn't get that sort of you didn't get that, I guess, leniency at the elite level. So that was the biggest thing I noticed from a decision making point of view, is if you blink, you would genuinely miss it.
And then the repercussions of the crowd launching on top of you as well. I can imagine what an environment it must be when you're in the heat of battle in tight games, in particular, huge crowds at the MCG, and people perhaps not being overly objective when it comes to which way the whistle should be blown.
Yeah, I've always found that the crowds have helped me. Like, give me 90,000 at the MCG every single week, because mentally I'll be so dialed in, and I won't be missing anything through a lack of concentration. It'll be positioning or just a judgment error. Like, that's all it will be. The danger games I find are the ones where you go to Darwin or you go to a Manuka, like one of those really sort of off-Broadway grounds, not your natural footy grounds that you play a lot of games at. And there's the festival atmosphere, and you've got to really work on yourself from a mental skills perspective to stay in the game for 120 minutes. I actually find those decisionally the hardest games to umpire.
Yeah, that makes sense. Umpires, obviously, in my mind, AFL football is probably the hardest game to umpire in the world, really, when you think about it. There are so many areas of grey, so many decisions to make, but also people don't really factor in the non-decisions you make. The decision-making around not making a decision is still a decision, and I know you guys, when it comes to your umpire reviews, are judged that way. What percentage of correct decisions are the best umpires going at?
Yeah, I couldn't reel the stats off the top of my head at the moment. But what I would say is we'd make over 1,000 decisions in a game individually. Like, that's play on, non-call, blowing the whistle, staying out, which way we go to get the best look. Like, every single step we take is a decision, right? In terms of, and that flows into how we go about, or how accurately that may affect the next decision on the ground. So we're constantly making decisions for 120 minutes. And I think from a percentage point of view, we'd be rolling definitely high 90s in terms of accuracy around that when you're taking all that into consideration. So, I think there's this perception that we just get so much wrong when we're out there. And I understand the game is so passionate and people will look through whatever lens they want to look through. And that's probably also the beauty of the AFL, and you can't have one way without the other. But there is this level of objectivity that sort of gets thrown out the window from supporters, from your brothers and sisters in the commentary box that want to see tight games and want the decisions to be the best outcome for what the viewer's going to appreciate. So we're always the calm ones. We're always the objective ones, and it's everyone else that creates the noise. And yeah, we get things wrong, like we always will. And as long as the game lives, we'll continue to make mistakes. But we get so much more right than we're given credit for.
Yeah, I guess you live in a landscape, don't you, where you're so unfairly scrutinised because one error becomes magnified when it's replayed over and over again, and there is so much discussion around it. How do you cope with that side of umpiring?
I've got better over time, that's for sure. There's often times too where things are replayed over and over and discussed and it's correct. So they're the ones that probably frustrate me the most, is that umpiring is a constant dartboard and we're not throwing any back. We just go about our job as quietly and as competently as we can. And that's always been sort of my MO. That's always been my DNA, is like, I'm quite an extrovert off the field, but when I go on, I feel like I put this other persona on that isn't a cape, and I'm sort of very reserved and I say what I need to say and I just try and pay the correct free kicks that are there. So that is very much what I'm trying to do out there. And then I guess the frustration with the media side of it is that we probably don't have much of a voice there, and there's not much objectivity, and people would prefer to be outraged than correct. And that's not just football. I think that's just society and life in general at the moment now.
Yeah. Ray Chamberlain was probably a good example of an umpire who was extroverted on the field and in his dealings with the players. What's your philosophy? And we do from time to time hear interesting interactions between players and umpires who are mic'd up. What's your philosophy around player management, player interaction, that sort of stuff on the field?
Everyone's got their own management style and we're all different people. So the way that Ray went about it, Ray was Ray exactly like that off the field as he is on it. I have a very different management style to someone like Ray, and that might be what best keeps him in the game and makes him the best that he was. But I think, yeah, we are humans at the end of the day, aren't we? So we need to humanise umpiring to a degree. But I think the best way to go about it is just say what you need to say, only answer a question if you're asked one, basically, only, engage if you're required to engage. And that's what I do. And I try and be as respectful as possible about it when, let's be honest, it's not always being asked in a very respectful manner. So I certainly don't go looking for those interactions, because when you do and the passions are up, sometimes you can be put in a position to perhaps even pay a fee. And we know what the dissent rule is. We know about abuse. I don't want to be put in a position to have to pay something that I don't really want to pay.
Yeah. On reflection, in all honesty, have you ever had a moment that you would look back on now and go, maybe I just got swayed a little bit by the so-called noise of affirmation or something a player said? Or can you reflect back and think, gee, that maybe I didn't quite get that right and I was influenced by external factors?
I don't think I've ever been influenced by an external factor, but there's certainly moments every single week that I look back on and go, geez, I wish I pulled a different rein on that, or I wish I handled this differently. I spent so many years trying to be a perfectionist in umpiring, and when I open like my feedback or my assessment, I'd go straight to the errors.
Yep.
And it's like we'd start at 100 and work backwards. And it's just such a horrible way to go about it in an industry, in an imperfect game where you're trying to be perfect. So I think with maybe age, maturity, I don't know, experience, whatever you want to call it, that I like to celebrate all the things that I do really well now and appreciate it. And I hope that I pass that on to the younger guys in our group as well, because I see them do and make the same mistakes I've made, which is sometimes a good things to make because you've got to make them to get into the right spot. But there's certainly every week I'm looking back going, geez, I thought that I should have backed my gut here, or why didn't I wait an extra half a second and give myself an extra half second before I blew my whistle in that instance? Because once the toothpaste's out of the tube, I can't, put it back in. So there's always those little things. But I think from an external factor point of view, like you'd be I'd find it very hard to see someone that would stay in this league very long if they were swayed by external factors.
Of course. And not dragging you into the mire on this front, but from an interest point of view purely, what What do you think is the worst decision you've ever made or the most critical error you've ever made in a game? I'm sure, given you're such a perfectionist and your performances are reviewed, that there'd be a standout. Is there anything that comes to mind?
There is a standout. It was in you have to go back to, I think, 2014 or 15.
That's how long it's been since you made a proper mistake, Nick.
No, the standout, and the reason it's the standout is because I made a decision and I guessed. And of my philosophy around it is, if I don't see it, I'm not paying it.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a clear high contact or a clear bump and I don't see it, I'm not going to guess, because I'm going to back my team in and our system in around me that someone's going to see it, because the moment you guess is the moment that you get it wrong. And I did a Port Adelaide West Coast game. It would have been in the first couple of rounds of the season. It was at Subiaco. And I remember it was Eric McKenzie running back with the flight of the ball and Hamish Hartlett going to mark it. And it was in the last quarter. Port were up by about 5 points. And I got blindsided because I was about 50 metres behind the play at Subiaco, which is pretty easy to do. The ground was about 4 kilometres long. And the moment I looked up, I saw Hartlett with the ball in his hand like he'd marked it. And I just didn't see how it got there. And I paid the mark. And you could just tell, like, when there is a reaction from players, you can cut through the shit. You know a genuine reaction from a gamesmanship action when they sort of try and get stuck into you. And Hartlett went back, kicked the goal, put Port up by 11 points or whatever, and the game was pretty much done and dusted. And I was running back to the other 50, and I got a look at the replay screen, and Mackenzie, I think it was Mackenzie or Schofield, they'd punched the ball about 5 metres before he'd marked it. So I've just made up a decision effectively, and it was just garbage. And I'll never forget it. And I sort of, after that moment, I was like, I'm never guessing or putting pieces together again, because the moment you do it, burnt. You can walk off the ground and you can leave one or two out there that, I can see why you've missed that. But you can't walk off the ground and go, I can see why you've paid that. So that was a really big learning, and clearly it's still eating me up about 11 years on now. So
you never forget those. Well, let's change tack, mate, because the grand final last year is testament to your umpiring quality. So talk us through that, how special it was, and the whole experience of being part of the most special day on the Australian football calendar.
Oh, it was the best week of my life. And I don't let football define me as a person, or it's a big part of my life, but it certainly isn't my life. But that was the best week of my life, grand final week. And all you set out, I think, to do, and I've put a lot of pressure on myself over a number of years I've had a lot of injuries to get my body right, to get some continuity within my performances, to be in a position to umpire a grand final. And my whole sort of life for the last 14 years has been, I want to umpire an AFL Grand Final. And I got there and the week was incredible. But one thing that, and this may sound silly, but the one thing that you can get caught up in is the week is so massive that you still got a game to do. Like players, for example, in clubs, they just want to win a premiership. So getting the grand final, great, they're there. And by the time we got around to sort of Friday, you'd been doing, the week is so different. You can't say it's just another game, because it isn't. That's just crap. But the week is like, you're getting thousands of people just messaging. People I've umpired with, in the SFL Regional League in 2006 are messaging me, which is awesome. And I was cognizant about it. I've got one or two ways here. I can reply to none or reply to all. And I'm like, no, I'm going to embrace every bit of feedback or anyone reaching out to me, because it's really cool. So I went that way. And but by Friday, after the parade, you're in the back of a Hilux. I got home and sat on the couch and I was absolutely exhausted. And I remember saying to my wife, Claire, I was like, I'm turning my phone off and I'm just going incognito now right through until first bounce, basically, which was the best thing I did. And like, we had a really good result from an umpiring perspective on grand final day last year. And look, the game, let's be honest, fizzed out and it wasn't what we thought it would be, but we certainly did everything we needed to from an umpiring perspective. So there's one thing to get a grand final. I think there's another thing to actually do your job really well and prove why they've entrusted you with that appointment.
Yeah, I mean, because you almost the less you're noticed, the better the job you've done, and I suppose you derive the satisfaction from not even hearing about the umpiring in many ways. What about those big games like an AFL Grand Final and the added pressure to get every decision right, and just I guess, the whole atmosphere around those huge games. Do you feel it as an umpire on the ground?
Yeah, definitely. I don't get nervous pre-game ever. I was on grand final morning. I had a little bit of a moment sitting at home. I had the heater put on about 29 and I had a blanket over me and I was shivering, and it took my wife to sort of say, I think you're actually having a bit of an anxiety attack there,
Wow.
Nick. And I was like, oh yeah. So I went and had a walk, got a coffee, and literally shook it off and was fine. But that was the one thing where I knew how much that day meant. And it's like, had all those doomsday things going in my head. What if I stuff this up? What if today is like, what if the only thing people are talking about at the end of the game is a decision that I've made in the 28-minute mark of the last quarter? Like, all those things, like, you're a human, right? They go through your head. So I had a little bit of that. But then once I got to the ground, I was just completely dialed in and in the moment, and absolutely loved it. And I mean, as the game, it wasn't overly close. So the last half of that game, I just got to run around and really reflect on how good is it being here, and having all my family and close friends in the stands and stuff as well. Like, that means a lot to an umpire to get to that game too. So that was a really cool second half, even though for the neutral watching on, or for the Swans fans, they're going, what's going on here?
Well, even more impressive is the fact that you'd been floored by Aaron Norton in the first week of the finals, hadn't you, leading up to that grand final? So you're basically in your position to make a decision, and Aaron Norton charges up the ground and flattens you, didn't he?
That was my fault, Al. I was completely out of position, and you play dumb games, you win stupid prizes, and I won one of the stupidest prizes known to man, which I definitely had a busted rib after that. So I was in a lot of pain through the final series. I was on some good pain relief. The following week I did GWS and Brisbane up at NG Stadium, and it was a belter. And I've never been in more pain in a game in my life from that rib. Just running every time I blew my whistle. I don't know if you've had a bruised rib or a busted rib before, Al, but it's just like one of the more uncomfortable things. So, that was just another layer to getting to grand final week, I think.
Well, you pushed through the pain barrier, Nick, and I'm sure it was all worth it in the end, and hopefully the first of many AFL Grand Finals. Just the second Tasmanian field umpire to umpire a Grand Final, Scott Jeffrey, in 2016. Awesome chatting to you. Just briefly in closing, a Tasmanian-centric question here. You get to tell your friends, interstate tourists, anyone, a place they have to go in Tasmania. Where are you recommending as the place they have to come and visit in your home state?
I'm just taking Hobart for everything it has to offer. I'm being very biased there. People are probably going to pick out and pluck. You ask that question to other guests, I'm sure they'll pluck out all these incredible spaces. But Hobart is just an absolute jewel of a city, and there's just so much to do from a culture and a food point of view, and I love getting home for all of that. So do Hobart and do it properly. Hand
in the air to umpire the first Tasmanian Devils game?
Oh, I've got that locked away. I've already said to the head coach that I'll be ticking that box.
I know it's not within your general realm, but we expect some hometown decisions. Nick Foot, fantastic chatting to you.
Thanks, Al. It's been good to chat, mate.
AFL field umpire Nick Foot, one of the league's top officiators, performing a largely thankless but vital role in the national game. Thanks for listening to Nick's story. For more episodes of The Heart of It, be sure to download and subscribe wherever you get your pods.